Buddhism, one of the world's oldest religions, is often misunderstood and surrounded by myths. These misconceptions can lead to a skewed understanding of its teachings and practices. In this video, we will explore and debunk 13 common myths about Buddhism, providing a clearer picture of what this ancient tradition truly entails. 1. Buddhism is a religion without a god. Contrary to the common assumption that Buddhism is a religion without a god, the truth is more nuanced. Buddhism, founded by Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, around the 5th century BCE, does not conform to theistic frameworks that involve worshipping a creator deity. Instead, it focuses on the teachings and path laid out by the Buddha to achieve enlightenment, nirvana. The Buddha is not considered a god in the traditional sense, but rather an enlightened being who discovered and taught the path to liberation from suffering. In Buddhism, the concept of divinity differs significantly from that in monotheistic religions. While it doesn't centralize the worship of a single god, Buddhism acknowledges the existence of various deities and supernatural beings, particularly in its Mahayana and Vajrayana traditions. These deities are not supreme creators, but rather beings who have achieved certain levels of spiritual development and can assist practitioners on their path to enlightenment. Moreover, the essence of Buddhism lies in its practical approach to understanding and overcoming suffering, dukkha, through the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. These teachings provide a framework for ethical conduct, mental discipline, and wisdom. The focus is on individual experience, personal transformation, and the cultivation of virtues such as compassion, mindfulness, and wisdom, rather than the worship of a deity. The absence of a central god figure in Buddhism allows for a flexible and inclusive approach to spirituality, accommodating diverse cultural and philosophical interpretations. This non-theistic nature has contributed to its appeal in various parts of the world, especially among those seeking a spiritual path without the constraints of dogmatic belief in a deity. 2. Buddhists worship the Buddha as a god. A prevalent misconception is that Buddhists worship the Buddha as a god. This misunderstanding arises from observing rituals and practices where Buddhists offer incense, flowers, and prayers before statues of the Buddha. However, these acts are not of worship in the theistic sense, but are expressions of reverence and gratitude for the Buddha's teachings. The Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, is regarded as an extraordinary human being who attained enlightenment and shared his insights to help others achieve the same. In Theravada Buddhism, the focus is on the historical Buddha and his teachings. Devotional practices in this tradition aim to cultivate respect and emulate the Buddha's qualities rather than deify him. In Mahayana Buddhism, the concept of the Buddha expands to include various celestial Buddhas and bodhisattvas, beings who have attained enlightenment but choose to remain in the cycle of samsara to help others. Figures like Amitabha Buddha and Avalokiteshvara, the bodhisattva of compassion, are venerated. But again, this veneration is not worship in the traditional sense. These figures symbolize the ultimate potential within all beings and serve as inspirational guides on the path to enlightenment. The rituals and devotional practices in Buddhism, such as chanting, prostrations, and offerings, are intended to cultivate qualities like mindfulness, gratitude, and humility. They serve as reminders of the Buddha's teachings and the practitioner's commitment to following the path he outlined. The Buddha himself discouraged his followers from viewing him as a god, emphasizing instead the importance of self-reliance and personal effort in attaining enlightenment. 3. Buddhism is just about meditation. While meditation is a central and highly emphasized practice in Buddhism, it is far from the entirety of the religion. Buddhism encompasses a broad spectrum of teachings, ethical guidelines, and practices that together form a comprehensive path to spiritual development. Meditation, particularly mindfulness, sati, and concentration, samadhi, plays a crucial role in developing insight, vipassana, into the nature of reality and cultivating mental discipline. However, Buddhism also emphasizes ethical conduct, sila, and wisdom, panna, as essential components of the path to enlightenment. The Eightfold Path, a core teaching of the Buddha, outlines a holistic approach that includes right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Ethical conduct in Buddhism involves adhering to precepts that promote non-harming, ahimsa, honesty, and compassionate living. These ethical guidelines are foundational to creating a conducive environment for meditation and mental development. By practicing right speech, right action, and right livelihood, Buddhists strive to reduce suffering for themselves and others. Wisdom, another critical aspect of the Buddhist path, involves understanding the nature of reality, particularly the concepts of impermanence, anicca, suffering, dukkha, and non-self, anatta. This wisdom is developed through study, reflection, and meditative insight. It is not merely theoretical, but is meant to transform one's understanding and experience of life. Furthermore, Buddhism includes various devotional and community practices, such as chanting, rituals, and participation in monastic communities. These practices help foster a sense of community, support ethical living, and reinforce the teachings. Pilgrimages to sacred sites, involvement in religious festivals, and acts of generosity, dana, are also integral to the Buddhist way of life. 4. Buddhism is only popular in Asia. Although Buddhism originated in Asia and has deep historical roots in countries like India, China, Japan, Thailand, Sri Lanka, and Tibet, it is far from being confined to this continent. Over the centuries, Buddhism has spread to various parts of the world and has adapted to different cultural contexts, gaining followers globally. The spread of Buddhism to the West began in earnest during the 19th and 20th centuries, facilitated by increased global communication and the efforts of scholars, travelers, and missionaries. Influential figures such as D.T. Suzuki, Thich Nhat Hanh, and the Dalai Lama have played significant roles in introducing and popularizing Buddhist teachings in Western countries. In the West, Buddhism has often been embraced in diverse forms. Some practitioners adopt traditional practices and rituals, while others integrate Buddhist meditation techniques and philosophical insights into their secular lives. The appeal of Buddhism in the West is partly due to its practical approach to mental well-being and its emphasis on mindfulness, which has found a prominent place in contemporary psychology and wellness practices. Western interpretations of Buddhism have also led to the development of new movements and adaptations, such as secular Buddhism and the mindfulness movement, which focus on the practical aspects of Buddhist teachings without necessarily adhering to traditional religious frameworks. This adaptability has allowed Buddhism to resonate with people from various cultural and religious backgrounds. Additionally, immigrant communities from Buddhist-majority countries have established temples and centers in Western countries, contributing to the growth and diversity of Buddhist practice. These communities maintain traditional practices while also engaging with the broader society, creating a dynamic and evolving presence of Buddhism outside Asia. In conclusion, while Buddhism's historical and cultural roots are undeniably Asian, its teachings and practices have transcended geographic boundaries. The global spread of Buddhism reflects its universal appeal and the adaptability of its principles to different cultural contexts, making it a truly global spiritual tradition. 5. Buddhists are pagan. The misconception that Buddhists are pagan stems from a lack of understanding about what constitutes paganism and the unique characteristics of Buddhism. Paganism typically refers to a group of polytheistic, nature-based religions often associated with ancient cultures, such as the Greeks, Romans, and Celts. It involves the worship of multiple gods and goddesses, nature spirits, and a reverence for the natural world. Buddhism, on the other hand, is a non-theistic religion that focuses on the teachings of Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, and the path to enlightenment. While Buddhism does acknowledge the existence of various deities and supernatural beings, especially in its Mahayana and Vajrayana traditions, these beings are not central to its practice and are not worshipped as supreme gods. Instead, they are often seen as symbolic or as helpers on the spiritual path. The core of Buddhism lies in the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, which provide a practical framework for understanding and overcoming suffering. The Four Noble Truths outline the nature of suffering, its cause, its cessation, and the path leading to its cessation. The Eightfold Path offers guidance on ethical conduct, mental discipline, and wisdom. This focus on personal spiritual development and ethical living distinguishes Buddhism from pagan traditions, which typically involve rituals and worship centered around deities and nature. Furthermore, Buddhism emphasizes the concepts of impermanence, anicca, suffering, dukkha, and non-self, anatta. These teachings aim to help individuals realize the transient nature of all things and the illusion of a permanent, unchanging self. This philosophical outlook is distinct from the animistic and polytheistic beliefs commonly associated with paganism. It is also important to note that Buddhism has a rich diversity of traditions and practices. While some forms of Buddhism, such as Tibetan Buddhism, incorporate elaborate rituals and the veneration of bodhisattvas and deities, these practices serve as aids to meditation and the cultivation of virtues, rather than as acts of worship in the pagan sense. Other forms of Buddhism, such as Zen, emphasize direct meditation practice and the experience of insight, with minimal ritualistic elements. In summary, while Buddhism and paganism may share some superficial similarities, such as the presence of rituals and reverence for certain figures, they are fundamentally different in their beliefs, practices, and goals. Buddhism's focus on the path to enlightenment through ethical living, meditation, and wisdom sets it apart from the polytheistic and nature-based worship that characterizes paganism. 6. All Buddhists are vegetarians. The belief that all Buddhists are vegetarians is a common misconception. While vegetarianism is encouraged in many Buddhist traditions for ethical reasons, it is not a universal requirement. The dietary practices of Buddhists vary widely depending on cultural, regional, and doctrinal differences. The principle of non-harming, ahimsa, is central to Buddhism and plays a significant role in the dietary choices of many Buddhists. Ahimsa encourages the avoidance of causing harm to all living beings, which aligns with the practice of vegetarianism. In countries like China, Taiwan, and Vietnam, where Mahayana Buddhism is prevalent, many Buddhists adopt vegetarian or vegan diets as a way to embody compassion and reduce suffering. However, in Theravada Buddhism, which is practiced in countries like Thailand, Sri Lanka, and Myanmar, vegetarianism is not as commonly observed. Monks in these regions traditionally rely on alms given by laypeople, and they eat whatever food is offered to them, including meat. The emphasis is on gratitude and detachment from personal preferences, rather than strict adherence to a vegetarian diet. The Buddha himself accepted meat offerings as long as the animal was not killed specifically for him, a practice known as the threefold rule. In Tibetan Buddhism, meat consumption is more prevalent due to the harsh climatic conditions and limited agricultural options in the Himalayan region. However, even within Tibetan Buddhism, there has been a growing movement towards vegetarianism, influenced by the teachings of prominent figures like the Dalai Lama, who has publicly advocated for reducing meat consumption. It is also worth noting that the practice of vegetarianism among Buddhists can be influenced by other factors such as health, environmental concerns, and personal convictions. Some lay Buddhists choose to follow a vegetarian diet during specific religious observances or festivals, even if they are not strictly vegetarian throughout the year. In modern times, the global spread of Buddhism has led to diverse interpretations and practices regarding diet. In Western countries, where ethical and environmental considerations are increasingly prominent, many Buddhist practitioners adopt vegetarianism or veganism as part of their commitment to compassion and non-harming. In conclusion, while vegetarianism is a significant practice in many Buddhist traditions, it is not a universal requirement for all Buddhists. The dietary choices of Buddhists are shaped by a combination of doctrinal teachings, cultural contexts, and personal convictions. The core principle underlying these choices is the commitment to reducing suffering and promoting compassion for all living beings. 7. Only monks can practice Buddhism. The notion that only monks can practice Buddhism is a misconception that overlooks the inclusive and accessible nature of Buddhist teachings. While monastic life plays a central role in many Buddhist traditions, lay people are also encouraged to engage in the practice and to follow the path to enlightenment. Monastic communities, or sanghas, are indeed important in Buddhism. Monks and nuns dedicate their lives to the pursuit of spiritual goals, adhering to a rigorous set of precepts and practices designed to foster detachment, discipline, and meditation. They serve as teachers and role models for lay practitioners, providing guidance and inspiration. However, the Buddha's teachings are intended for all individuals, regardless of their monastic status. Lay people can practice Buddhism by following the 5 precepts, which are ethical guidelines for everyday life: refraining from killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, and intoxication. These precepts help lay practitioners cultivate moral conduct, an essential foundation for spiritual development. Lay Buddhists are also encouraged to engage in meditation, study the Dharma, Buddhist teachings, and participate in community activities and rituals. Many lay people attend meditation retreats, join study groups, and support their local monasteries through acts of generosity, dana. These practices help lay practitioners deepen their understanding of the teachings and integrate them into their daily lives. The Eightfold Path, a core teaching of the Buddha, outlines a comprehensive approach to spiritual practice that is accessible to both monastics and lay people. It includes guidelines for ethical conduct, mental discipline, and wisdom, emphasizing that enlightenment is attainable for anyone who diligently follows the path. In addition to ethical conduct and meditation, lay Buddhists can cultivate qualities such as mindfulness, compassion, and wisdom through various practices. Mindfulness, sati, involves maintaining awareness of the present moment, a practice that can be incorporated into daily activities. Compassion, karuna, and loving kindness, metta, are cultivated through specific meditative practices and acts of kindness towards others. Buddhist festivals and ceremonies also provide opportunities for lay people to participate in the religious life of their community. Festivals such as Vesak, which celebrates the Buddha's birth, enlightenment, and passing, involve rituals, chanting, and communal activities that foster a sense of belonging and spiritual growth. In contemporary times, the global spread of Buddhism has further demonstrated its adaptability and inclusivity. Lay practitioners around the world have access to a wealth of resources, including books, online courses, and meditation apps, making it easier than ever to engage with Buddhist teachings and practices. In summary, Buddhism is not limited to monastic practitioners. Lay people play a vital role in the Buddhist community and have ample opportunities to practice the teachings and follow the path to enlightenment. The inclusive nature of Buddhism ensures that its transformative teachings are accessible to all who seek them. 8. Buddhism is anti-materialistic. The belief that Buddhism is anti-materialistic is based on its teachings about the impermanence of material possessions and the potential for attachment to lead to suffering. However, this interpretation can be overly simplistic. While Buddhism does caution against excessive attachment to material wealth and encourages a mindful and balanced approach to possessions, it does not advocate for extreme asceticism or the complete rejection of material life. One of the core teachings of Buddhism is the concept of the middle way, which the Buddha discovered after experiencing both extreme asceticism and a life of luxury. The middle way advocates for a balanced approach to life, avoiding both excessive indulgence and severe deprivation. This principle applies to the use of material possessions as well. Buddhists are encouraged to live simply and mindfully, appreciating what they have without becoming overly attached to it. The Buddhist teachings on impermanence, anicca, highlight the transient nature of all things, including material possessions. This understanding helps practitioners develop a sense of detachment and reduces the craving for material wealth that can lead to suffering, dukkha. The goal is not to reject material goods entirely, but to cultivate a healthy relationship with them, recognizing their temporary nature and avoiding the pitfalls of greed and attachment. Generosity, dana, is another key aspect of Buddhist practice that reflects its approach to material wealth. Dana involves giving freely to others, whether it be material goods, time, or support. This practice helps reduce attachment to possessions and fosters a sense of interconnectedness and compassion. Acts of generosity are highly valued in Buddhism and are seen as a way to cultivate positive karma and support the spiritual community. Monastic life in Buddhism does involve a greater degree of renunciation of material possessions. Monks and nuns take vows of poverty and live communally, relying on the support of lay people for their basic needs. This lifestyle allows them to focus more intensely on their spiritual practice. However, even within monastic communities, there is an understanding that material needs must be met in a balanced and sustainable way. For lay practitioners, Buddhism teaches the importance of right livelihood, one of the elements of the Eightfold Path. Right livelihood involves earning a living in a way that is ethical and does not cause harm to others. This principle encourages Buddhists to engage in occupations that are honest and beneficial, promoting a balanced approach to work and material success. In contemporary society, the application of Buddhist principles to material wealth can be seen in various ways. Many Buddhists practice mindful consumption, making conscious choices about what they buy and how they use resources. This approach aligns with broader movements towards sustainability and ethical consumerism, reflecting a mindful and responsible attitude towards material possessions. In conclusion, while Buddhism does caution against excessive attachment to material wealth and promotes a mindful and balanced approach to possessions, it is not inherently anti-materialistic. The middle way, generosity, and right livelihood are key principles that guide Buddhists in developing a healthy relationship with material goods, emphasizing balance, ethical conduct, and mindfulness. 9. Buddhism is pessimistic. The misconception that Buddhism is pessimistic likely arises from its emphasis on suffering, dukkha, as a fundamental aspect of human existence. However, labeling Buddhism as pessimistic overlooks the comprehensive and ultimately hopeful nature of its teachings. While Buddhism begins with the acknowledgement of suffering, its primary focus is on overcoming and transcending this suffering through the path to enlightenment. The first noble truth of Buddhism states that life involves suffering. This suffering comes in various forms: the pain of birth, aging, sickness, death, and the dissatisfaction arising from unfulfilled desires and the impermanence of life. Rather than being a bleak outlook, this acknowledgement serves as a realistic assessment of the human condition. The second noble truth identifies the cause of suffering: craving or attachment, tanha. This craving is rooted in ignorance, avidya, of the true nature of reality. People suffer because they cling to things that are impermanent, and because they harbor desires that lead to inevitable disappointment. The third noble truth offers a positive resolution: the cessation of suffering is possible. This state, known as nirvana, represents the end of craving and the liberation from the cycle of rebirth, samsara. It is a state of ultimate peace and freedom, where one is no longer subject to the afflictions of desire, hatred, and delusion. The fourth noble truth outlines the path to achieving this cessation of suffering, the Noble Eightfold Path. This path is a practical guide to ethical conduct, mental discipline, and wisdom. It includes right understanding, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Following this path leads to the development of insight and the cultivation of a compassionate and balanced life. Far from being pessimistic, Buddhism offers a hopeful and practical framework for transforming suffering into a profound sense of well-being. It encourages individuals to take responsibility for their own happiness and to engage in practices that foster personal growth and the alleviation of suffering for others. Moreover, Buddhism places significant emphasis on the cultivation of positive mental states, such as loving kindness, metta, compassion, karuna, sympathetic joy, mudita, and equanimity, upekkha. These qualities are developed through meditation and ethical living and contribute to a sense of fulfillment and joy. In contemporary applications, the principles of mindfulness and compassion from Buddhism have been integrated into therapeutic practices and wellness programs, demonstrating their effectiveness in enhancing mental health and overall well-being. The growing popularity of mindfulness-based stress reduction, MBSR, and other mindfulness practices highlights the positive impact of Buddhist teachings on modern life. In conclusion, Buddhism's acknowledgement of suffering is not a mark of pessimism, but a starting point for a transformative journey. By understanding the nature of suffering and its causes, and by following a path that leads to its cessation, Buddhism offers a profound and hopeful vision for overcoming the challenges of human existence. 10. The popular fat bald man statue is a representation of Siddhartha Gautama. The common image of a laughing fat bald man, often mistaken for the Buddha, is actually not a representation of Siddhartha Gautama, the historical Buddha. This figure is known as Budai in Chinese, or Hotei in Japanese, a folkloric character who is often associated with contentment and abundance. Budai was a Chinese monk who lived during the 10th century. He became a popular figure in Chinese culture due to his jovial personality, eccentric behavior, and benevolent nature. Often depicted with a large belly, a broad smile, and carrying a sack filled with gifts, Budai is considered a symbol of happiness, prosperity, and good fortune. He is sometimes referred to as the Laughing Buddha in Western cultures. In contrast, Siddhartha Gautama, the historical Buddha, is typically depicted in a more serene and meditative posture. Traditional representations of the Buddha show him with a slender physique, reflecting the ascetic practices he followed before attaining enlightenment. Common images include the Buddha in meditation, teaching, or in the moment of his enlightenment under the Bodhi tree. The conflation of Budai with the historical Buddha can be attributed to the spread of Buddhism and its adaptation to various cultures. As Buddhism traveled to China, it integrated with local traditions and folklore, giving rise to new interpretations and figures like Budai. These adaptations helped Buddhism resonate with different cultural contexts, making its teachings more accessible to diverse populations. Budai's presence in Buddhist temples and his association with happiness and prosperity also illustrate the inclusivity and adaptability of Buddhist practice. While Budai is not a central figure in Buddhist doctrine, his image serves as a reminder of the joy and generosity that are integral to the Buddhist way of life. It is important to recognize that Buddhism encompasses a wide range of traditions, each with its own iconography and symbols. The Theravada tradition, for instance, focuses on the historical Buddha and his teachings, while Mahayana Buddhism includes a broader pantheon of bodhisattvas and other enlightened beings. Vajrayana Buddhism, prevalent in Tibet, features a rich array of deities and ritual practices. Understanding the distinction between Budai and Siddhartha Gautama helps to appreciate the diversity within Buddhism and the various ways its teachings have been interpreted and celebrated across cultures. By recognizing the different figures and their significance, we gain a deeper insight into the rich tapestry of Buddhist traditions. 11. The Dalai Lama is the Buddhist Pope. The Dalai Lama is often referred to as the Buddhist Pope, but this comparison is not entirely accurate. While the Dalai Lama is a prominent spiritual leader within Tibetan Buddhism, Buddhism as a whole does not have a centralized authority figure equivalent to the Pope in the Roman Catholic Church. The title Dalai Lama translates to Ocean of Wisdom, and it refers to the spiritual leader of the Gelug school of Tibetan Buddhism. The current Dalai Lama, Tenzin Gyatso, is the 14th in a line of successive incarnations believed to be the manifestations of Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of compassion. The Dalai Lama is revered for his spiritual insight, moral authority, and role as a political and cultural figurehead for Tibetans. Tibetan Buddhism is one of several major schools within Buddhism, each with its own leadership structure and traditions. Other major branches of Buddhism, such as Theravada and Mahayana, have their own spiritual leaders and do not recognize a single overarching authority. For instance, in Theravada Buddhism, leadership is more decentralized, with each country or region having its own monastic hierarchy. The role of the Dalai Lama extends beyond religious leadership. Historically, the Dalai Lamas also served as the temporal leaders of Tibet, combining spiritual and political authority. This dual role was particularly significant before the Chinese occupation of Tibet in 1959, after which the 14th Dalai Lama went into exile in India. In exile, he has continued to advocate for Tibetan autonomy and cultural preservation, while also promoting global peace, nonviolence, and interfaith dialogue. The Dalai Lama's teachings emphasize compassion, mindfulness, and the importance of cultivating inner peace. He has gained international recognition for his efforts to bridge the gap between Buddhism and modern science, particularly in the field of neuroscience and the study of meditation. His work has helped to popularize Buddhist principles in the West and has inspired many to explore the spiritual path. It is important to understand that while the Dalai Lama is a significant figure within Tibetan Buddhism, he does not wield doctrinal authority over all Buddhists. The diverse nature of Buddhism means that spiritual leadership is distributed across various traditions and regions, each with its own respected teachers and leaders. In summary, the Dalai Lama is a highly respected and influential spiritual leader within Tibetan Buddhism. But the comparison to the Pope is limited. Buddhism's decentralized and diverse structure means that there is no single leader who represents all Buddhists. The Dalai Lama's prominence and global influence, however, reflect his unique role in promoting Buddhist values and advocating for peace and compassion. 12. Buddhism is a single unified tradition. The notion that Buddhism is a single unified tradition is a misconception that overlooks the rich diversity within the religion. Buddhism is a complex and multifaceted spiritual tradition that has developed in various forms across different cultures and historical periods. While all Buddhist traditions share core teachings rooted in the life and teachings of Siddhartha Gautama, they exhibit significant differences in doctrine, practice, and organization. Buddhism can be broadly categorized into three main traditions: Theravada, Mahayana, and Vajrayana. Each of these traditions has its own unique characteristics and sub-schools, reflecting the adaptability and evolution of Buddhism over time. Theravada Buddhism, often referred to as the teaching of the elders, is the oldest surviving form of Buddhism. It is prevalent in countries like Sri Lanka, Thailand, Myanmar, Laos, and Cambodia. Theravada emphasizes the original teachings of the Buddha, as preserved in the Pali Canon, and focuses on individual enlightenment through meditation, ethical conduct, and wisdom. The monastic community, Sangha, plays a central role in Theravada practice, and lay people support the Sangha through acts of generosity, dana. Mahayana Buddhism, or the Great Vehicle, emerged later and is characterized by a broader and more inclusive approach to enlightenment. It is widely practiced in East Asia, including China, Japan, Korea, and Vietnam. Mahayana teachings emphasize the ideal of the bodhisattva, an enlightened being who forgoes final nirvana to help all sentient beings achieve enlightenment. Mahayana Buddhism includes a diverse array of texts, such as the Mahayana Sutras, and incorporates practices like devotion to bodhisattvas and chanting. Vajrayana Buddhism, also known as the Diamond Vehicle, or Tibetan Buddhism, developed within the Mahayana tradition and incorporates esoteric practices and rituals. It is practiced primarily in Tibet, Bhutan, Mongolia, and parts of Nepal and India. Vajrayana emphasizes the use of mantras, mudras, ritual gestures, and mandalas, symbolic diagrams, as tools for spiritual transformation. The role of the guru or lama is central in Vajrayana practice, and initiations and empowerments are essential components of the path. Within these broad categories, there are numerous subschools and lineages, each with its own interpretations and practices. For example, in Theravada Buddhism, the Thai forest tradition emphasizes meditation and monastic discipline, while the Mahasi tradition focuses on vipassana, insight, meditation. In Mahayana Buddhism, Zen and Pure Land are two prominent schools with distinct practices and teachings. Zen emphasizes direct meditation experience, zazen, and the use of koans, paradoxical riddles, while Pure Land Buddhism focuses on devotion to Amitabha Buddha and the aspiration to be reborn in his Pure Land. The diversity within Buddhism is a testament to its adaptability and resilience. As Buddhism spread across Asia and beyond, it interacted with various cultures, philosophies, and religious practices, leading to the development of distinct traditions that address the unique needs and contexts of different communities. Despite these differences, all Buddhist traditions share fundamental teachings, such as the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, the principles of karma and rebirth, and the cultivation of compassion and wisdom. These shared elements provide a common foundation that unites the diverse expressions of Buddhism. In conclusion, Buddhism is not a single unified tradition, but a rich and diverse spiritual landscape. The various schools and traditions of Buddhism reflect its ability to adapt to different cultural and historical contexts while maintaining core teachings. This diversity enriches the Buddhist tradition and offers a wide range of practices and perspectives for those seeking the path to enlightenment. 13. All Buddhists believe in reincarnation. The belief that all Buddhists believe in reincarnation is an oversimplification that does not capture the complexity of Buddhist teachings on life, death, and rebirth. While the concept of rebirth is central to many Buddhist traditions, interpretations and understandings of this concept vary widely. In classical Buddhist teachings, particularly in Theravada Buddhism, the cycle of rebirth, samsara, is a fundamental concept. It is believed that beings are reborn in various realms of existence based on their karma, the moral law of cause and effect. The ultimate goal in Theravada is to achieve nirvana, the cessation of rebirth and the end of suffering. Rebirth in this context is understood as a continuation of the mental and karmic processes rather than the transmigration of a soul, as Buddhism rejects the notion of a permanent, unchanging self, anatta. Mahayana Buddhism also upholds the concept of rebirth, but with additional layers of complexity. The Mahayana Bodhisattva ideal involves beings who have attained enlightenment, but choose to be reborn to help others achieve liberation. This compassionate vow to return until all beings are liberated underscores the Mahayana emphasis on collective salvation. Vajrayana Buddhism, particularly Tibetan Buddhism, incorporates elaborate teachings on the afterlife and rebirth. The Tibetan Book of the Dead, Bardo Thodol, describes the intermediate state, Bardo, between death and rebirth, offering guidance for navigating this transition. Vajrayana practices often include rituals and prayers to influence the process of rebirth and to benefit those who have passed away. However, modern interpretations of Buddhism, especially in the West, sometimes approach the concept of rebirth metaphorically or agnostically. Secular Buddhists and those influenced by scientific perspectives may view rebirth as a symbolic representation of the continuity of actions and their consequences, rather than as a literal process. For these practitioners, the focus is on the ethical and psychological implications of karma and mindfulness in this life, without a firm belief in an afterlife. Furthermore, some contemporary Buddhist teachers and scholars emphasize the psychological aspects of the teachings, interpreting rebirth as a moment-to-moment process rather than a literal post-mortem event. In this view, rebirth refers to the continual arising of mental states and habits that shape our experience and character, highlighting the importance of mindfulness and ethical living in transforming one's present condition. The diversity of interpretations reflects the adaptability of Buddhist teachings to different cultural and intellectual contexts. While traditional beliefs in rebirth continue to play a significant role in many Buddhist communities, contemporary approaches demonstrate the flexibility of Buddhism in addressing the needs and understandings of modern practitioners. In conclusion, while the concept of rebirth is a significant aspect of many Buddhist traditions, not all Buddhists interpret it in the same way. The range of beliefs, from literal to metaphorical, illustrates the diversity within Buddhism and its capacity to accommodate different perspectives on life, death, and the continuity of existence. This flexibility allows Buddhism to remain relevant and accessible to a wide range of individuals seeking spiritual understanding and ethical guidance.